There are currently 6 domains in Riftbound, but it can be kind of overwhelming to look at the entire pool of over 300 cards and figure out what you need to worry about. So today I'll be kicking off a series where I go one by one through each of the domains and talk about all of their relevant spells that you need to worry about, the gear that they can play, notable units, as well as which decks you might expect to see them in. Because knowing what your opponent can play is like 90% of the work of making sure you don't get caught off guard. I've already talked about the champion legends, their signature cards, and their associated champions in other videos, so be sure to go check that out if you're interested, because I won't be covering the champion legends or their signature spells in this video, because they're hybrid, they fit between 2 different domains. Wouldn't make sense to cover them in both. But on that note, I make daily Riftbound content here, so be sure to subscribe if you're looking for more informative material. You can also leave a like, check out the description for the Discord link where we can play games, you can give input on future videos, and if you're looking to go the extra mile, you can even support me over on Patreon, like all of these wonderful people. But with that in mind, today we're going to be covering the Fury domain, which has 43 cards in it between the Origins and Proving Ground sets. This includes 12 spells, 9 champion units, 17 normal units, and 5 pieces of gear that you can expect to see across 5 different champion legends. I'm not going to go into them in a ton of detail here, but there are 5 champion legends that you can build your deck around if you're looking to play Fury. These include Jinx, Kai'Sa, Volibear, Darius, and Ahri. Of those, Kai'Sa, Ahri, and Darius are pretty strong, and Volibear and Jinx are also decks people can choose to play. They're fun at the very least, right? With that all out of the way though, we're going to get into the spells, and notably, all of them in the Fury domain, with the exception of 2, can be played at action or reaction speed, meaning your opponents have a ton of way to interact on your own turn if they're playing Fury. The 2 spells which they can't play on your turn are Falling Star and Firestorm. And between the 2 of them, I think we gotta start with Firestorm because that's probably one of the best Fury cards in general. So Firestorm is a 2 energy spell that costs 2 power as well. Very expensive if you're not playing Kai'Sa. And it reads, do this twice, deal 3 damage to a unit. And you can choose different units for each part. So this is very powerful, especially as an early game clear tool. You can hit units in the base, which is very important as it makes it difficult for your opponent to keep their cards safe if you're using Falling Star. Or you can double up and deal extra damage to a single target, hitting them for 6, which is pretty considerable and gets around most things in the game. Now the problem with cards like this that hit multiple times rather than one big hit is that you have to pay deflect costs multiple times as well. So for example, if you want to take down a Kiana and you're hitting them with 2 casts of Falling Star, you got to play their deflect cost, you got to pay it again, and then you're also paying the power. Imagine I'm pointing the other way when I point this way. And then you also have to pay the power cost for this card. So if you're not playing Kai'Sa, you're now down 4 power to cast this one card. And that's pretty rough. Even so, this card is super strong. Now the other card that you can play in Fury that isn't at action or reaction speed for spells is Firestorm. A 6 energy 1 power card. Very expensive, but it deals 3 damage to all enemy units at battlefields. So this is a proper board wipe. It hits everything that's at a battlefield that your opponents control, and 3 damage is okay. It's enough to clear most of the smaller units in the game, but you're not going to be clearing any of the big ones, and this is a lot to spend to not clear the big ones, you know? Even so, if we're ever in a meta where something like Viktor or token-based strategies, like we're seeing Azir's coming out soon, this might be very good against those decks specifically. And 3 is kind of that sweet spot for dealing with smaller units, so this isn't too bad. Onto the action and reaction spells that Fury has access to, and I'm going to be addressing these in order of energy cost. This way you can tell what your opponent might have depending on how much energy they have available. So starting with Cleave, which costs 1, this has action and says give a unit Assault 3 this turn, so it gets 3 might when it's attacking. Now this is very strong on your own turn. Obviously it gives a big buff that lets you get over a ton of different units, but it can also be very strong if you're playing against a Calm or Chaos player, as their units can also make your units move and attack. So for example, someone uses Charm or Blitzcrank or Fight or Flight or any other card that works in a similar way. If they're pulling your unit into one of their units at a battlefield, you can still use Assault as a reaction or an action in response to that to buff your unit, as they are technically attacking now, and that could make or break a situation. I think Charm is one of the strongest spells in the game right now, and it's super cheap, so Cleave is kind of your response to that. The other 1 energy spell that Fury has access to that you need to be a bit cautious of is Hextech Ray. This is 1 energy and 1 power, again, essentially free for Kai'Sa as they don't have to pay the power cost. but at action speed you can deal 3 damage to a unit at a battlefield. So this one can be particularly scary early game, as if you are the one to make the first move and push one of your units forward onto a battlefield, a Kai'Sa or any player can use this spell to clear out your attacking unit if it has 3 or less might, and that effectively puts you a turn behind, which can be super detrimental. So obviously you need to be cautious on your first turn if they leave 1 energy up. Now this next one is a bit interesting as it's our first really niche card here. Get Excited costs 2 energy and 1 power, and lets you discard 1 card to deal damage equal to its energy cost to a unit at a battlefield. The reason I'm saying it's niche is because most of these decks that I've talked about so far don't really have much of a top end. In Kai'Sa or Annie, for example, you're probably playing Darius, which is a 5 damage, pretty good, but outside of that, there's not much. The Kai'Sa deck has Thousand Tail Watcher, but I don't know if I'm discarding Thousand Tail Watcher. So where this card is really effective are in the Jinx and Volibear decks. Ironically, the 2 that I said were lower power level. The reason this works in Jinx is that it acts as a discard enabler. She has other cards that we'll talk about later that when they get discarded have some kind of effect, so this allows them to kind of benefit doubly from one effect here. And on the Volibear side, all their units are just big as shit. So by discarding them, you can sometimes burst something for 10 damage, which is quite a bit. And that actually makes this a really good answer to a lot of those cards with Deflect, or in some cases even things like the Aurora decks, as their units don't typically have 10 might. They might sometimes, but in general, this can clear some of the things they bring out, which is pretty huge. Next we have Incinerate, which is from the Proving Ground set. This is a 2 energy spell that at action speed deals 2 damage to a unit at a battlefield. This is just a worse Hextech Ray at the expense that you're not paying a power cost and instead you're paying an extra energy cost and dealing less damage as a result. So notably, this is better in the Annie deck than it is in the Kai'Sa deck, as she readies 2 runes at the end of her turn, whereas Kai'Sa can't get that discount by tapping herself if she's not paying any power costs, right? So it is more flexible in Annie specifically, but I still don't think that it's better than Hextech Ray at all. Shakedown is actually the only reaction card that Fury has access to. It is a 2 energy, 1 power spell that says at reaction speed, choose an enemy unit, deal 6 damage to it unless its controller has you draw 2 cards. So on the one hand, this is pretty good removal, and we've talked about how 6 is a decent amount to actually hit something for. But on the other hand, if they want to keep their unit, you're suddenly drawing 2 cards for 2 energy. That's not bad. So either way, I think Shakedown in general is just an okay card. No matter what happens, you're going to get some advantage out of it, and that's pretty strong. The only downside is that you can't really guarantee that this is going to be used as removal, but if you're going into it thinking it's probably going to act as a card draw engine rather than removal, I think you're going to be pretty happy playing this most times. Onto Void Seeker, which is a 3 energy, 1 power action spell that deals 4 damage to a unit at a battlefield and allows you to draw a card. This is, I think, an extremely strong card. I know a lot of people cut it, but I just disagree. 4 damage is very strong. There's a lot of units that are at that 4 mark rather than 3, and you're guaranteeing a card draw, which is just great. And again, in Kai'Sa specifically, you get to negate the power cost. This is just an all-around really solid removal spell, and it replaces itself, so if your opponent ever has 3 up while they're playing Fury, be expecting that you can take 4 damage from their cards. Now, a strictly worse version of that is Disintegrate, which is kind of similar to Incinerate, as it is more expensive than a very similar card, but does less damage. And in this case, it has another negative condition as well. So, Disintegrate, 4 energy action spell, deal 3 damage to a unit at a battlefield. If this kills it, draw a card. This is 1 less damage than Void Seeker, and it's conditional card draw. Just rough. Don't play Disintegrate, it's bad. Blind Fury is a really weird Fury spell. It is 4 energy and 2 power, and says at action speed, each opponent reveals the top card of their main deck. The errata to this will have you choose one, then banish it and play it, and then recycle the rest of them. So this is a interesting card. I think if we're ever in a meta that has a lot of top end, like Dazzling Aurora is everywhere, this could be super good. We are currently not in that meta. Most of the decks right now are Kai'Sa, and you're looking at like a 3-cost unit on average if you hit something. This can cast spells as well, which is nice, but I don't know. Notably, this is better in multiplayer games as well, so if you have 3 or 4 people playing the game, you get more options. But I just don't think that this is so fantastic right now specifically. Probably the number one side deck card that Kai'Sa has access to right now is Thermo Beam. 5 energy and 2 power, and at action speed it allows you to kill all gear. So obviously if you're playing this, you're probably not playing gear in your own deck, or maybe your gear has death knell effects, which I don't believe exists right now, but don't quote me on it. And this can be used to clear things like your opponent's Dazzling Aurora. If you're playing this with purple, you might have Scrap Heap in the deck. If they have Seals out, if they have the Sun Disc, there's a bunch of decent gear in the game, and this can clear all of it, which is pretty cool. But it is 5 energy, and if they're not playing gear, then this is just a dead draw. So it's a really high-risk card if you're playing it in the main deck, but very rewarding if you put it in the sideboard and swap it in for games 2 or 3. And our last Fury spell is Sky Splitter at 8 energy and 1 power. This is an action spell that says this spell's energy cost is reduced by the highest might among the units you control. Deal 5 damage to a unit at a battlefield. Again, we're looking at this being played in the Volibear deck specifically, as they have a bunch of big bunguses that can lower this card's cost. In those decks, this isn't too bad. However, it is better late game than early game, and those decks are fine late game, but they really struggle early anyways. So it's hard to say. Now that said, in those decks, if they are playing this, you can just kind of spike something for 5 damage, which is pretty nice. And if for whatever people are playing this in their main deck, it can kind of be combined with Cleave to get a 3 energy discount on Sky Splitter. That's kind of a fun combo. But in general, I just don't think this is a fantastic card. It is something you need to be aware of if they have a bunch of energy open or a big unit though. Onto our non-champion units, and we're going to start off with the Chemtech Enforcer. This is 2 energy and 2 might. Assault 2, and when you play it, discard 1. Like Get Excited, this is a discard enabler, which is great in the Jinx deck. However, outside of that, I don't think many people are going to be playing this. It's not a bad attacker, like it does swing for 4, but only when it's attacking. So you do need to be a little bit careful with it. If you are playing this, maybe something like Reaver's Row could be a cool battlefield to pair it with. You go in, swing for 4. When your opponent tries to take the battlefield, you pull it back, and you can swing again the next turn. That's kind of very strong, I think. But in general, I don't think this is getting played too much outside of Jinx. Annie potentially could run it if they're doing a whole like discard package with Scrap Heap as well. But I don't know. A more common 2-drop that you might see is Legion Rearguard. Again, 2 energy for 2, but it lets you play it ready for 1 extra energy and a power. I still don't think this card's great, but it is something that your opponents can play if they're in an aggro deck to really get ahead of the board. Your premier 2-drop in the red decks, though, is probably the Pouty Poro. This is a 2 energy, 2 might unit, again, just like the other 2. However, it has Deflect, which means if your opponent wants to target it with a spell or ability, they have to pay 1 extra power to do so. And if the meta is a lot of Kai'Sa and Annie, that can be a problem. So Pouty Poro is just fantastic. I really like him. I think I run 2 in my Kai'Sa deck, but 3 is definitely an option. Moving on to the 3-drops, we have Dangerous Duo, a 3 energy, 3 might unit with Legion. When you play me, give a unit +2 might this turn. So this could be cool in a Darius deck or an Annie deck, I think, are the main ones that I see it in. Basically, any deck where you're trying to play multiple cards in a turn and focused on offense, this is pretty good. This is something that you can only do on your own turn, though, which can be an issue. But, I mean, if you're just swinging for the fences, this isn't a bad option. It isn't really something you have to worry about too much for your opponent playing it, though, because you're already playing around Cleave anyways, and that gives 3 might, so we're not super paranoid about 2 might here. They can be combined to give something 5. That's pretty considerable. But again, Dangerous Duo's only like fine overall. I wouldn't be too worried about seeing it. Flame Chompers is one of the premier discard targets. This is a 3 might, 3 energy unit that says when you discard it, you can pay 1 Fury Rune to play it. This essentially makes it a free 3 might unit that you can use to synergize with your other effects. That's pretty strong. For example, let's say the Jinx player starts, they use Chemtech Enforcer, they discard Flame Chompers and recycle a rune. Suddenly they have this 3 might unit and a 2 might unit that swings for 4 that they have access to on the next turn, and that's pretty good, I think. A very scary card is the Immortal Phoenix, a 3 energy, 1 power unit with 3 might that has Assault 2, and when you kill a unit with a spell, you can pay 1 energy and a power to play it from your trash. So this is a card that comes back turn after turn, as long as you can keep popping things on the field with spells. So we're probably looking at Annie and Kai'Sa again. The whole reason those 2 cards are so good is they just work with everything, unfortunately. There is an argument that it could be paired with Jinx as well, as she has a Super Mega Death Rocket and a bunch of the red removal spells. but I mean, Annie and Kai'Sa are probably where you're seeing this. More specifically, Annie seems to be the one making the most use of this, and you do need to be careful because this is a triggered ability, which means it's not really restricted to the normal playing times that a unit would have. So if you move something forward to a battlefield, they hit it with a Void Seeker, and then cast this from their trash, put it on their base, they can attack with it on their turn as it readies at the start of their turn. That could be pretty devastating. So this is a card that you need to be aware of if it's in your opponent's trash, and it's a really hard one to deal with as long as you keep putting units onto the board that they can target and destroy. But if you're not doing that, you lose the game, so try and play around it as best you can. Our last 3-drop here is the Noxus Saboteur, which is a 3 energy, 3 might unit that says your opponent's hidden cards can't be revealed here. This could be a very solid sideboard piece, as every color other than red has pretty decent hidden spells. For example, green has Zona's Hourglass, yellow has Facebreaker, blue and purple have a fuck ton of them, orange has Paka Cub, which, fine. So in most matchups, you'll be able to get some value from this at the very least, especially if you're playing against a Teemo, but I don't really think that you're main decking this. I think it's just a cool option to bring in if Teemo's ever super relevant. Following that, we get to our 4 drops with Captain Farron, a 4 energy, 1 power unit with 5 might that says other friendly units here have Assault 1. This is a cool attacking unit if we're working with token related cards. We don't super have a lot of token cards in red. If you're seeing it, you're probably going to be seeing it in a Darius deck, as they have access to yellow as well, which has a ton of little token generators. So you can get a good amount of value out of it that way, but I don't think this is super powerful. It can be like fine, but I don't think that this is going to be the most effective card that most people are playing around. And it's typically a card that's very telegraphed, so you don't have to worry about it in most cases. Now, it can be readied if they have the Sun Disc. That's an option. And in that case, it could be a little bit better, but I don't think that's something you got to worry about. Now, a very good 4-drop is the Noxus Hopeful. This is a 4 energy unit with 4 might that has Legion. This card costs 2 less. So if you've already played one other card this turn, Noxus Hopeful is a 2 energy, 4 might unit that is phenomenal. I've won so many games because this card is just a bastard to deal with, and it adds a ton of extra stats to the board for just 2 energy. And even if you do have to pay it at full cost, so 4 energy for the 4 might unit, like that's fine. It doesn't do anything else at that point, but it's at least at cost at that point, right? A 4 energy unit should have 4 might, so it's not like you're getting screwed out of anything here. Raging Soul is a 4 energy unit, again with 4 might. However, this is one of the cards that benefits from discard. Again, we're probably looking at the Jinx deck. So this says, if you've discarded this turn, I have Assault and Ganking. This can be very strong, especially if played with something that can ready it or move it, which is typically going to be in purple. And notably, that's where all the discard synergy is, so that's good. I really like Raging Soul. It's a very niche card. It's only going to be in those discard decks, but I think it's very strong in those, so something to be considerate of. Blazing Scorcher is our first 5-drop, this time being a 5 energy unit with 5 might that has Accelerate. Now, something to be aware of with this card is that it's a dragon. Dragons don't have a ton of support right now, but they do have Herald of Scales in orange, which lowers the cost of dragon cards by 2, and if dragons get a lot of support, suddenly this is a 3 energy, 5 might unit. That could be pretty good. On top of that, 5 might means that it is officially mighty, which benefits the Volibear deck. When you play a mighty unit, Volibear allows you to channel a rune Exhausted, and in this case, that means you can use that rune to negate most of the cost for this Accelerate cost, and that's pretty cool. This is about as close to an early game card as you can get for mighty, and it's just a decent card all around because of that. Am I playing it in any deck other than Volibear? Probably not, though. Scrapyard Champion, another discard synergy card. 5 energy and a power for 5 might. It has the Legion effect. When you play this, discard 2, then draw 2. Now, notably, the discard 2 is not part of the cost, it is part of the effect. So if you play this when your hand is empty, now you can draw 2 cards for free. That's very good. So this can be something to bring you back in the game once you're completely tapped out of cards, and I think that's great. However, it is a little bit complicated to play it with Jinx, and that's the deck that you want to play this in, right? So let's say you start your turn, Jinx goes off, you draw your card for turn. That's now 2 in hand. This is one of them. You need to play whatever that other card is, and then drop Scrapyard Champion to get the most benefit, the discard 0 to draw 2. But then you need to be able to play one of those extra cards so that Jinx has 1 card in your hand at the start of your turn, so you can get your extra draw there. You don't need to do that, But to effectively pull this card off, if you're triggering Jinx, you need to be playing 3 cards in a turn, which is a lot to worry about. Even so, I mean, this is a really cool card, and you could do a lot of cool things with it. Moving on to 6 energy, and we have Brazen Buccaneer, which comes in at 5 might. However, if you discard a card when you play him, you can lower his cost by 2. This is essentially the red version of Cruel Patron, which needs a sacrifice to be played. However, the cost is optional, and if you can trigger things like Scrap Heap or Flame Chompers or any of those cards, like, you're going to be pretty happy playing this card. If you can't trigger them, you're going to be pretty upset as it's negatively statted, right? It's 5 might for 6 energy. I think this could have a place depending on how much synergy we get for discard. I don't know if we're there yet, though. Brynhild Thundersong is a really interesting one for red players specifically. This is a 6 energy, 5 might unit that says, when you play me, opponents can't play cards this turn. So if you're playing red and your opponent ever passes while their energy pool is completely open, this shuts that down immediately, and I think that's really strong. Notably, they can still react to this card while it's on the chain. So if they have something like Void Seeker, they can still cast it while this is on the chain, but in general, it completely stops their ability to react on your turn, and that could be really strong depending on the deck you're playing against. Annie and Kaisa would really hate to play against this, so it's something to consider. But again, we're understated. I'm not so certain what's looking to play this right now, but I think it could be seen as like a sideboard option eventually. We have another dragon with the Raging Firebrand, 6 energy, 1 power for 4 might. This says, when you play me, the next spell you play this turn costs 5 energy less. I mean, that's pretty cool. I don't know how good this is right now. Again, once we get more dragon synergy, this could be very cool. Notably, if it's paired with Sky Splitter, this card only costs 1 power now. That's pretty cool. You can combo these two together like that. I don't think the support is all there right now, but again, this is one of those cards I think could be cool in the future. A card that I don't understand how it's not a dragon is Magma Worm. This is 8 energy and a power for 8. Yes, I know it's a worm, but like, I mean, look at this thing. And it says other friendly units enter ready. This can be super strong. Just having a blanket, everything comes in ready, is great. The problem is it has no way to protect itself, and if you're spending 8 energy, you're probably not playing another card that turn, which gives your opponent a whole turn to respond to this, and they're just going to take it off the board before it does anything. I think this might have a place if you're playing Dazzling Aurora, but in general, ironically, I think it might be a little bit too slow, despite speeding up the rest of your cards. And our last big bungus for the normal units in Fury is Cadragon the Infernal, 9 energy, 2 power, and 9 might. Big boy. This says, when you play me, draw 1 card for each of your mighty units. So for everything that has 5 might, you get to draw a card. I'd say you could probably guarantee 2, maybe 3 safely with this card. That's okay. He's pretty big, which is nice. Again, you're looking to get this off Dazzling Aurora, though. Playing it by itself is just way too expensive. It's just too slow. Hopefully, more dragon support, more yay. I like dragon cards. I don't know. It's cliche, but like, they're cool. What do you want? Moving on to the champion units now. First and foremost, we have Vi. Very scary card. This is 2 energy, 1 power, and 3 might. Vi has ganking, so it can move between battlefields. Very cool. And recycle 1 from your trash. Give me 1 might this turn. Couple things here. Firstly, that is not a once per turn effect. You have 10 cards in your trash. Put all 10 of them back. Vi is now a 13 might unit for the turn. That's good. Second, that is the buff for the entire turn. So if you can ready her after she attacks, or move her if you're playing purple, you're going to swing for 13 again in that case. That's real scary. Now, after that turn, she's not great. But if you're smart with when you do it, if you're either conserving it for 1 big push or kind of mitigating it a little bit each turn to just get her where she needs to be, she can be really strong. Something to be worried about if you are playing Vi, though, is that it's not a reaction ability or an action ability. So you can only play this effectively whenever you would be able to play a unit from hand. But even so, like, this is a really cool and this is a really powerful ability, especially if you use it well. Jinx Demolitionist is a 3 energy, 1 power for 4 might. This one has Accelerate, so it can come in ready if you're paying that extra cost. Notably, that means you are playing a second power. I'm not crazy about Accelerate on units that already have power costs in most cases. I think you got to be really careful with them. They can be very strong, but I think it's something that is very easy to misuse and can put you behind if you do it at the wrong time. Aside from Accelerate, Jinx has Assault 2, so she swings for 6. That's pretty cool. And she has when you play me, discard 2. That is not an optional effect, be careful about that. But if you have things like Scrap Heap in your hand or Flame Chompers, you can double down and really benefit from that. Or it can just set you up to use your Jinx Legends ability so you get an extra draw every turn. Both are fine. Both are fine options. We have the Bank Breaker Kai'Sa Survivor. This is a 4 energy, 4 might unit. Again, this one has Accelerate. Notably, no power cost in the actual Kai'Sa card, and you're preserving power if you're playing Kai'Sa as a legend, so this is the deck where they would be able to expend that. However, really any red deck is probably going to be playing this if they can. It's just really good because on top of the Accelerate, when she conquers, you draw a card. Free card draw on a unit that comes in readied is just really good. It's consistent, it's easy, it's decently statted. I don't know what more you want from a card like this. If you're playing against Kai'Sa or you're playing against Fury, you need to save some kind of removal so that you can stop this card from conquering, because as soon as Kai'Sa does conquer, they're going to start building up advantage. They have more cards in their hand. They can stop you from doing things on your turn. This is a very snowball-y deck, and having that draw engine in the champion unit zone enables all of that. And for the other decks that play this card, like, it's still scary even in those. So just be aware. If they have 5 energy up, Kai'Sa is available to them at a readied pace. A card I'm kind of mixed on is Vayne Hunter. This is 4 energy and a power for a 2 might unit. That's kind of low, but she has Assault 3 to mitigate that. On top of that, if your opponent controls a battlefield, she comes in readied, and then after she conquers, you can pay 1 to bounce her back to your hand and potentially play her again, have her attack again if they control the other battlefield. This is a really good top deck card if your opponent controls both battlefields and you need to clear them both for that 8th point. This is a really fun card. I think it fits her really well thematically. I'm excited to see what more we can do with her going forward. I think in particular, she fits Darius and Annie decks really well. So if you're playing against those two and it's later in the game, just be aware that you need to have at least 5 might on each battlefield if you're planning to hold it. Next up, we have the Proving Grounds champion card, the Annie Fiery. This is 5 energy, 1 power, and 4 might, a little bit understated, but she says that your spells and abilities deal 1 bonus point of damage for each instance of damage they do. So Acathian Rain now does 18 damage instead of 12, Falling Star does 8 instead of 6, almost everything else is just +1. There are a couple gear that benefit from this, the green Caitlyn card benefits from this, there's a bunch of little things. I think this has a bunch of synergy with a lot of stuff. My biggest problem with her right now is that there's only a couple cards that target more than one thing, so you're not benefiting from the each instance part. However, I think in general, she's fine. She's also very expensive. 5 energy for this effect is probably too much. 4 is maybe okay, I'd say, but 5 is just too much in most cases. Speaking of 5 though, we have Darius Trifarian, one of the best Fury units. I would say every Fury deck is playing 3 of him. So this is 5 energy, 1 power, and 5 might, but when you play your second card in a turn, give him 2 might and ready him. So something to be aware of is that if he is your second card, he will trigger himself. Something else to be aware of is that second is very specific. It's not second after you play him. It's not every 2 cards. It is the second card you play in a turn. First, second, that's it. It can't trigger again outside of that. But this is a card that can ready himself. If he's in one battlefield at the start of your turn, you can move him back, play 2 cards, move him to take the other one. That's pretty good. You can also move him forward, play a second card, pull him back. Like, he just has so much built-in mobility. He has a faux accelerate, which is great. He can empower himself. It's just such a strong unit. Be aware of it. Be aware of it. This is like a game-winning card. Speaking of game-winning, this card gets better if you're winning the game. Draven Showboat. This is 5 energy, 1 power, and 3 might. Seems really low stats, but he gets 1 might for every point you have. So if you're at 7, this is now a 10 might unit. Really hard to deal with. Can be a very cool top end for a lot of decks. I don't know which decks particularly want this right now. Probably Darius is the main one, maybe Jinx. Not so much in any of the other red legends right now though. In general, he's just a very big win more card. If you're ahead, he's great. If you're behind, I mean, you've probably got 3 or 4 points at least in most games. So he comes in 6-7 on average, I'd say.
6-7.
That's not terrible. If you're playing the Arena's Greatest battlefield, you can actually get a benefit from this as well. Have him default at 4. That's kind of cool. You can have some synergy there. So he's great in aggressive decks and decks that benefit from this point thing. I guess you could also play him with purple or green. Windrider Yasuo can get you extra points. Ahri can get you extra points. Maybe you pair it with that. There's some equipment in the new set that also gives you extra points. So these extra scoring cards might be an option for how you want to build this guy. But in most cases, I don't think he's seeing a ton of play. Maybe as a one-of in Darius, though. Speaking of extra points, we have Tryndamere Barbarian, 7 energy, 2 power, 8 might. A little bit overstated, which is nice. Really strong in terms of power. And when he conquers after an attack, if you assigned 5 or more excess damage to enemy units, you score a point. Now that is pure Disneyland. I don't know if I've ever seen this proc. Maybe I've seen it proc once. But it's just like, not only does he have to swing, but they know that he's there because he doesn't come in readied unless you have an outside ability. He costs 7. That's quite a lot. And they have to have 1 unit in that spot in a turn after they've seen you set him up who has 3 or less might for you to be able to trigger his effect. That's a lot of requirements. I don't see it going that way most times. As we get more readied cards, maybe that could be fine. He could be paired with removal, maybe you Void Seek or something, and then swing him in. And notably, if they have no units in a battlefield, you can't get that extra point because you're not dealing excess damage. It's not when I conquer, get an extra point. It's when I conquer and deal 5 extra damage to a unit. That's just not good, man. I wish this card was cool. I love Tryndamere, but I don't think so. Our last Fury unit is Volibear, 10 energy, 2 power, 9 might. This is a large lad. He has a deflect 2 on him, which means if your opponents want to target him, they have to pay 2 extra power to do so. That's quite a lot. It can build up pretty quickly, especially if you happen to defend him, and if he survives that, maybe they have to target him again, and that builds up so quick. On top of that, when he attacks, deal 5 damage split among any number of enemy units here. So that's not bad if you can get him readied, but, I mean, If you have, like, Kadrigan down and then play this guy, oh, crazy. Imagine, you swing in for 10, you deal an extra 5 for free. Oh, crazy. How are we doing that? That is 2 turns that your opponent needs to have no interaction with. I don't know. He does have some protection with Deflect, like I said, but if you're putting him on the board and he's not readied, they see he's there. They can play around it quite a bit, right? So I don't know. This is just, these cards are too expensive on the top end of Fury. And it's not like these colors really generate a lot of runes outside of the Volibear deck. So, like, obviously this gets played in Volibear, but I just don't think he's fantastic overall. He can win you games for sure. He'll beat me probably a dozen times, but that doesn't mean that it's a consistent thing, and I think consistency is more important than high rolling. Now our last category of cards for the Fury domain are the gear, starting off with the Seal of Rage. 0 energy, 1 power, just like all of the other gears, and it has the reaction ability that you can tap it to pay for a red power. This is okay. A lot of red cards do have a power cost, so you're helping out with that. But I think in general, a lot of these red decks are trying to move a lot faster. And if you're spending one of your draws on picking up this, like that's a card that could have been an aggro piece to set you up further on the board. These are great incremental value pieces. And I don't think that red typically needs incremental value in that way. Some colors are better for this, but like the main red deck is Kai'Sa, who already covers one of your power costs every turn for spells. So you're saving on that already. Then we have Annie, who untaps energy every turn, and she can maybe build more towards energy than power costs. Darius, there's an argument for. Jinx, there's an argument for. Volibear, I don't think you really care. You're making an extra power every turn because of the legend once you hit mighty cards. So I just think like you could play this in a couple red decks, but for the most part, The Sun Disk is a card I really like. Okay. We gotta talk. How the fuck is Azir in yellow and green when the Sun Disk is in red? Did I go the right? I went the right direction. That's how angry I am. Who the fuck planned? Azir is on this card. Fuck, I did the wrong way. Azir is on this card. Like, what are we doing here? That's his whole thing is the Sun Disk. I don't know. I don't know who did this. I don't know why. Mistake. Regardless, though, the Sun Disk is a 2 energy, 1 power gear that can be tapped at Legion speed, so you have to have played another card earlier that turn and then you can ready the next unit that you play. So this is really good in Darius decks because the whole point is that you're playing Legion effects as often as you can. So playing one thing and then a second one, it's reasonable. Ahri there's an argument for because you're reserving the energy and you can kind of go overboard on your own turn and have resources to play spells on your opponents. And I would say Volibear, but like to benefit from this, really, you want to use it on a big unit, but to play that big unit, you need to spend most of your energy, and to activate Legion, you have to have a small thing in your hand that you can use freely. This is like, it fits the ability of what a Volibear wants, but not the requirements of how to play this effect. So I don't know how I feel about that, but I think this card's going to be really cool in the future. I just don't think it's really useful right now in most decks. He even had, the flavor text is Azir. What are we doing here? Our next gear is 2 energy for the Unlicensed Armory. You can tap it and discard 1 to choose a friendly unit. The next time it dies this turn, pay 1 red power, recall it exhausted instead. This is kind of cool. It's a discard enabler, which is great. It's some recursion, which is also okay. It is kind of expensive if you're using it a lot, because discarding, you kind of need things to work with the discard effect for it to be good. And the power cost is a lot. Like if you're playing this, you might as well play the Seal of Rage as well. Those two kind of work hand in hand together. And then most of the cost is not something you have to worry about. So maybe this is like something you could play reasonably in the Jinx deck, but I don't know. I think we need a little bit more support for either discard or ramping for this to really work. The treasure tokens or the gold tokens that we're going to be getting in the Spirit Forge set, maybe there's an argument there that makes this better. But again, it's just not quite where I think this card needs to be yet. Really interesting card is the Iron Ballista. 3 energy, comes in exhausted, which is unfortunate, but you can exhaust it to deal 2 damage to a unit at a battlefield. This just picks off little guys once every turn. I think that's cool. I don't like that it doesn't do anything the turn that it gets played, but after that, it's 2 free damage every turn. I don't know who wants this. Ahri, I guess, can like supplement her taking things out with spells. Darius doesn't want it. Jinx probably doesn't want it. Kai'Sa doesn't want it. Volibear definitely doesn't want it. Yeah, so maybe Ahri and nothing else. We'll see maybe as we get more cards in the next set. I think the effect is really cool. It's in line with what I like to play, but it's too slow as it is now. And the last card that we gotta talk about today is the Ravenborn Tome. 3 energy for this gear, and it's a card that they have errated to be worse than what it was before. So this says you can exhaust it, and the next spell you play deals 1 bonus damage. That's so cool, because turn after turn you can build that up. It doesn't say the next spell you play this turn, right? So you can just build up and boom, you hit them for 10 damage with something. Except for that's what got changed. Now this says the next spell you play this turn deals 1 bonus damage, and this card is unplayable. I don't think anyone wants this. Maybe it'll see play if we get more incremental spells like Falling Star or Acathian Rain, but we would need a bunch of those for this to even be in the consideration. But there you have it. We've gone through all 43 of the Fury cards, where they're useful, when you need to be worried about them, and how they can actually get played. Fury is one of the most powerful domains in the game right now. It is such an aggressively strong color. It has removal, it has a lot of speed, but it doesn't have a ton of longevity, and a lot of the cards just cost a lot. So the ones that are very strong, but it has a ton of cards that are just too weak or too slow to get played. So the ones you actually have to worry about are pretty few and far between, really. I'll put on screen now the cards that I think are the biggest things to be aware of in Fury. These are the cards you need to look out for every game if you see them. There's probably a couple that are good in like specific decks or whatever, but these are the big ones. I'm talking about Falling Star, Cleave, Hextech Ray, Void Seeker, Thermo Beam if you're playing a gear deck, Immortal Phoenix in very specific decks is a recurring threat, the Kai'Sa champion, the Vayne champion arguably, and the Darius champion is a huge one. And those are really it. Those are all the big threats that you need to be aware of within the Fury domain, but I think knowing everything that's possible from a certain color is really important so that you can play effectively. Let me know which domain you want me to talk about in the comments down below for the next video, and I'll try to get that out as quickly as I can. For now though, if you enjoyed, remember to leave a like and subscribe. Let me know your favorite Fury legend or card in the comments down below, You can check me out over on Patreon if you want to support the channel like these wonderful people yet again. And of course, we have our Discord where you can play games, talk about deck building, and give your input on future videos. Well, that being said, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.